There is absence of people-centric decision making within, not within the political establishment, but definitely within the bureaucracy. And it's difficult to do things when this mismatch is continuously happening, right? If something has to be privatized, if it's a burden on the government, and if it's uselessly a burden on the government, why keep it in the public sector, right? We would privatize that. You can't just fire people, and you can't put the burden of badly made political decisions on the people also. If they have to be fired, then the people who put them there also have to be they have to be punished.
Sri Lanka since 1995.
Welcome to another edition of Insight. I'm Shihar Aneez. Today we have a special guest with us to explain about what's happening with the government. We have here Lakmali Hemachandra, attorney at law, and MP under the NPP current government. Welcome to the show, Lakmali.
Hi Shihar, it's nice to be here.
Yeah. Lakmali, I just want to ask you because most of the people don't know the NPP MPs.
Right.
Just tell me about your background. Where were you? How did you come here? And how did you become an MP? The background.
Okay. So I'm a lawyer. I was a practicing lawyer for about 10 years. And I was working with mostly on labor issues and women's issues with local organizations, trade unions, women's organizations. And I think ever since I passed out from the law faculty, I was working with more grassroots organizations because I thought they lacked access to legal support. So I was trying to, fill that void. And I think that was looking back, it was really a very formative, it was a good training for me. It was very formative and it gave me a lot of understanding and, I was in touch with the ground. I still am. I still keep in touch with those people and I still keep in touch with those organizations and listen to them. And so that was how I got into, legal work. My legal work was primarily that. And then when I was in university, I attended Columbia University about a long time ago now, about 15 years ago. And then it was in 2012, when I was in the university, they started the FUTA strike action.
Okay, this is the 6%.
Yes, 6% for education. So I was in the university. And
were you a student?
I was a student. Okay. I was a student in university. I was in the law faculty. I was a student. And it was during that time that I actually got interested in politics or something that was beyond my day-to-day life, right? Because up until that point, we were just students. In school, we were students, and then in university, we were just students. Of course, because I was a law student, I was interested in politics, but that didn't mean that I was into anything active. But around the FUTA strike, the 6% struggle, everybody got invested in education, and especially because we were university students, we got really invested in what was happening. And there were a lot of academics in our universities also who were supporting that strike. There were discussions and all of that. So we got into that. And I think it was after that I got actively, interested in what was beyond my daily life into something that's happening outside and how that can actually influence our lives, because our studies actually stopped for 3 months because of the strike. Some people took it negatively, but I think I took it positively. It gave me a chance to, explore into other stuff. And I think after that, of course, I kept on closely observing what was happening in national politics and also student politics. And there was a lot of, Columbia University was a very dynamic place for different opinions at that time. I'm not sure how it is now, but at that time, there was a lot of student activity, student politics around, opinions, exploring new ideas. So we were into that. And then after we graduated from the university, I started working with, local organizations, women's organizations, trade unions. And And then I got involved in NPP when it was first formed in 2019. And I supported NPP at that time also. And during COVID, of course, everybody was very dormant. And I was very dormant. I was, the pandemic was very, a tough time for everybody. And then when the Aragale, right before the Aragale actually, when the teacher strikes came, when the farmer strikes came, and we could see that politics was shifting. It was, people were not, they were not tolerating what was happening in the country. And there was an actual crisis also in the country, right? Not necessarily because the government was imposing it. There were external conditions influencing it, but there were problems in the country. So then around that time, also I got actively involved again, and got actively involved with NPP also. And right after the presidential election, I was asked to represent the parliament. It was actually I was not planning to do that, to be very honest. Because I was not a politician.
I want to ask that question. How do you manage or feel the pressure? Because you and most of the NPP MPs are the first time in the parliament, not only in the parliament, but first time in the politics, most of them, right? They have not been even a councillor in local council, right? So how do you all manage this, and how do you feel the pressure?
The transition has been tough. I don't have to pretend about it. It was a tough transition. But I think the good thing about being an MP is that there's a lot of external support. You have an actual leadership who will, guide you, nurture you, tell you when you are getting it wrong, and tell you when you need to step up on something. So, and they give you a lot of opportunities also. So it's a good place to grow as a politician if you want to be one, right? And I think being a lawyer also helped me, because I was actually like a litigating lawyer. I was a counsel. So because I was a counsel, I am used to argumentative situations. I'm used to situations where, especially, older men coming with very tough arguments. So I was used to that. I was used to that. So, and because I was somebody who was representing women and workers, I was also used to being at the underdog situation, right? So I think that training was very useful for me. I think I learned a lot. And even being a politician, I used that a lot, because I at the end of the day, it's about representing what you stand for, right? And being very authentic about it. That's the way I look at it. So I think that has been, it was a tough transition for me, because I think the hardest part was because I was a private person. People didn't know me. Nobody would know who Lakmali Hemachandra is, right? And now I don't have that to a great extent. So I have to be and because of the media scrutiny, because of public scrutiny, there is a lot of, it's not just for me, even my family, even my friends.
Your privacy.
Yeah, I have lost my privacy, right? So that is something that that's something that I have to still adapt to, because you don't know, people behave very freely in their private life, and you can't do that now. You have to, always think about whether there's a camera on you, whether there's somebody, listening to you. So it's not as free as it used to be, but I think it's a good, in spite of that, it's okay, I feel, because you're doing good work. Yeah.
Lakmal, now let's come to some of the hardcore questions. There is a gap between the expectation of the public and what you all are delivering, the reality, right? This might be because of promises you all made during the election campaign, and still the government is trying to do something, but still it's struggling, right? Many things they want to do overnight, but it's not happening. How do you feel this?
I think that's a good question, Shihar, because I think that's because, change has to be facilitated through institutional and, policy frameworks eventually. So I think because we are not, if this was like a revolution in the very traditional sense of it, let's say like in Cuba or Russia, or where you have like a violent overthrow of the previous setup, then you have an extremely new setup it doesn't have to be, in spite of the politics of the political flavor of the setup. If there was something that was completely overthrowing the system, then I think change would have come really fast, right? And but that is not how it happened here. It was a very democratic, peaceful transition, and we are bound to some of the legal traditions, the constitutional traditions of the previous regimes. We can't entirely change it overnight, especially the state structure. I think this is something that I have been thinking about actually for the past few years, because we have the political establishment of the states, which is democratically elected. And then you also have a very continuous state with, officials, it's huge. It's like, it's a structure. The bureaucrats, the officials, so they also have a certain power over how things are done. And there are policies that they have been framing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that they have been doing that. But sometimes you can't exactly, fire all of them. You don't have to also, you don't want to. You just have to find a rhythm where we can, work together and understand the democratic nature of the political establishment. So the mandate that we have, eventually we have to implement that. That is our goal, is to implement that, right? But in certain situations, in certain, offices, in certain places, there might be resistance to that. Because they might, think this is not the time, or this is, there might be other complications. So I think we are a government. We have to be responsible for everybody who voted for us and who didn't vote for us, right? And, who will be in trouble if we get something wrong also. We are aware of that. So we have taken an approach where we don't necessarily, radically bulldoze over everything, but try to do incremental step-by-step change, where we try to, win people over to our side. I think the democratic mandate has to be established. It has to be fully established. But to fully establish that, you have to win over people who are not necessarily democratically elected, right? And who don't necessarily think that democratic governance is, officials might think this government will come and go, but they are to stay here, right? So I don't see anything wrong with that attitude also, because that's how it should be. But then we have to come into a agreement. We have to find that rhythm. So I think that is what we are trying to do right now. We can't really, some people, because public might be very frustrated sometimes.
Yeah, people actually voted for you all for a radical change, right? System change and a radical change, which they don't see it now at the pace they expected, right? And as you correctly said, I think there is a resistance from the bureaucrats, right?
I wouldn't call it resistance. I think it's just a period of adaptation where they have to fully come into terms with the mandate. Because...
But Lakmal, we haven't seen the same thing in the previous governments, right? In the previous governments,
there are other ways of incentivizing it. Let me just put it like that.
You say basically, your government or your party was sent to the parliament to make changes, at least to legislate, bring in new legislation and bring the process. Why that is not also happening?
What kind of process are you suggesting?
The process. See, now we are talking about corruption. Corruption everywhere. Now we don't see corruption at the highest level, like ministerial and ministers level. But it's a fact that it still exists. Corruption still exists at the official level, public official level. Now the process means what people expected was to bring in some legislation and to curb this corruption, right? The corruption at grassroots level. That is still not. That has still.
I think corruption has.
I'm giving you just an example. Just one example in the corruption. Likewise, there are many things, right? If you see, if you go to a shop, you don't see their price tags, right? But still, people, try being cheated, or if you go in a bus. You don't get the balance. These are small things, right? Now, these are some of the changes people expected. And these are easy things you also can,
it looks easy, Shihar. To be very honest, it looks easy, but it's not that easy, because these are, let's take corruption, because you started off there. I think we have some of the legislations that were actually in the pipeline, but were not coming through. We supported them when we came to power. So proceeds of crimes was one of the first, I think it was the first new act that we passed in the parliament. And we're using that now. We institutionalized it also, established the DIG on proceeds of crime, and now it's being instrumentalized also. So I think that's a good thing. You will see these things as we go along. I think the impact of having a political leadership that is very anti-corruption is, you can see it in the bureaucrat level also. I think maybe not to the level that everybody expects, but I personally think that corruption has definitely fallen in the way that it was used, right? Because what happened earlier was politicians were incentivized to be corrupt, and on the other hand, politicians were in turn incentivizing the officials also to be corrupt. So that cycle has stopped, right? So now I think we're also struggling with bringing up new incentives when corruption stops, which is the actual incentive to the system to stay on. Then you have to bring in new incentives, which is why we have increased the public sector wages, for example, because we understand that public sector has been underpaid for a very long time. So we want to increase the wages. And if you look at the institutions, if you look at the state institutions, they are understaffed also. Maybe they have been politically staffed, but they are not actually, given the skills and the right people to do the work, right? So that's why we are recruiting more people. We have recruited about 75,000 people. The approval was given to recruit 75,000 people in the last year. And this year, that will continue. So a lot of people think, why are we increasing the public sector? But you need a good public sector to do anything, right? To do anything, you need a good public sector. To implement good policies, you need public sector. To work on the ground, you need public sector. And we have repurposed some of the public sector workers also into other projects. So we're trying to, restructure in a way that doesn't make people feel like they're being bulldozed. Because we have a tradition of politicians coming, doing things radically, changing things, and then going out of power. And then a new set of people will come, they will try to do it differently, or, and then they will also go out of power. And what happens eventually is you don't have policy consistency, which is one thing. And our officials are also, not very, they don't take it seriously. Policy is not taken seriously. So we want to change that. And to do that, you have to, sort of work in a manner that will convince because public sector is our arm. That is the arm that we can implement anything, right? That is the implementation arm of the political establishment. So you have to keep them, you have to have an understanding. It's not just about, the minister wants to do it, so do it. That is what I think people expect. But that there's so much that you can do with that, right? And what I have, this is a personal observation that I have, is that people are always ready to give you ad hoc exceptions. Like, let's say previously, education, for example. I think Prime Minister has spoken about this openly. There were schools which had classrooms for politicians to, put their preferences. I'm sure everybody's willing to do that. Like, let's give them a class. But actual policy reforms on education, actual changes, that will be resisted, right? So even like public sector jobs, they will, you put my people there, they will do that. That's an ad hoc exchange of, power, right? They have control over here. The politician wants to put somebody there. So let's exchange that. That kind of exchange is possible, but real change where you actually democratize the process, that is resisted. So if we look at the relief package that we introduced for after the disaster, there was a really good relief package for people, right? And I've seen statements by certain trade unions of public sector trade unions who are, trying to criticize that also, trying to, discredit that. So there is a certain, we have to change this. This is something that we have to change. There is absence of people-centric decision-making not within the political establishment, but definitely within the bureaucracy. And it's difficult to do things when this mismatch is continuously happening, right? But I think on our side, what we have to do is find inspiration and stay committed to our mandate, which is what we do. We always put the mandate first. We always make sure that, yes, there has to be compromises. We don't think that, realistically speaking, we don't think that we can do everything we want to do over a period of short time, right? And there might be other stakeholders who think differently. So we have to listen to them also. That is democratic governance, right? But our basis of ruling, the way where we come from is our mandate. That is what we want to do, and we are fully committed to that.
Your mandate says, Lakmali, you will not go for privatization,
Yeah.
right? But you will go for efficient public sector.
Yeah.
Now, we are also in a IMF program where they want to reduce the size of the public sector.
Yeah.
Now, you correctly said that you want to increase the wage of public servants, which is correct.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what Singapore did, right?
Yeah.
They raised the salary of the public servants, reduced the number of the public servants, and made it efficient. Now, the cycle of recruitment still going on.
Yeah.
Now we have around 1.4 to 1.5 million public sector people in the public sector, servants, right? How are you going to make it efficient in a way that it will not be a huge burden on the public sector, but people and the taxpayers?
Yeah. So I think our policy on privatization, public sector it's not necessarily about being against privatization. I think we have explained it also. It's about making it, if something has to be privatized, if it's a burden on the government and if it's uselessly a burden on the government, why keep it in the public sector, right? We would privatize that. There's nothing, there's no ideological there's no baseless, irrational fear of privatization. But what we do think is some of the public sector assets does not have to be privatized for one thing, and should not be privatized for public good, for national good. So that is the policy that we have. And if you look at the public sector, yes, there is 1.4 million cadre positions, Shihar, but I think right now we don't have that filled. So there was a de facto freeze on public sector recruitment for about 10 years now. For about 10 years, there hasn't been proper recruitment into the public sector. And this has the actual numbers in the public sector is actually much lower than this. So you see the cadre positions to say, okay, you have 1.4 million, but that doesn't, in reality, it's not there. It's about, I think it's slightly above 1 million, right? So regardless of that, what you say is true, that some of these workers have to be repurposed into other projects. So for example, we have a lot of development offices on the ground, right? So one thing that we did was, when the Prajashakti project came about, instead of introducing a new field officer into the Prajashakti project, what we did was we repurposed the development officer and assigned them onto the Prajashakti project, right? So now they have a different project. They're funded also, but there won't be an increase on the wage bill, because now we're using the same workforce to what traditionally would have happened was this would have been looked at as an opportunity to increase new, put more politically inclined. That was how, I mean, let's be realistic, development officers were recruited in that form, right? So instead of going that way, sometimes these are public officials who have been recruited under different governments, under particular political drives, but if there was a political retaliation, that would have been understood also, right? And that's how it happened. You fire everybody hired under the previous governments, but we don't want to do that. We think, because in spite of all that, I think these are graduates. They have a degree. They know what, I mean, they are trained labor. They just have to be used in a productive manner, right? So from this year onwards, we are rolling out the Prajashakti program, which is about poverty alleviation. And next year onwards, it's going to be even more intensive. So I think we are going to repurpose all that development offices into those projects, right? So likewise, we are trying to, instead of recruiting new people, we are also trying to repurpose the workforce into different areas. So, and then there's the public sector, let's say CTB, CEB, there is a certain, those, especially some places like CTB, the SLTB, has a huge gap in what is required for good operations and what we actually have, right? So, certain new labor force has to also be recruited into SLTB. I think the SLTB has started it, recruiting engineers, technical officers. They don't have it. Like depots don't have technical officers, depots don't have engineers, you don't have capable managers, you have politically appointed managers, right? So we're trying to change that also. But then you also have the challenge of what to do with the current, you can't put the burden on those people, because this is a tough time for everybody, right? You can't just fire people, and you can't put the burden of badly made political decisions on the people also. If they have to be fired, then the people who put them there also have to be they have to be punished also. So I think this has to go through a process of accountability in terms of what happened in the previous regimes, and there has to be a bit of a more compassionate, human approach towards the workers in the system right now. So that is what we are mostly trying to repurpose them. I think there is a chance of repurposing most of them.
But in the long run, I guess IMF has given some numbers, something like to reduce it to 800,000 to something like that, or maybe around 50 to 60%. In the long run, can you do that? Can the government do that?
IMF, I'm not sure how tough IMF is on this condition specifically, because we have been doing recruitments and IMF has not raised it, as far as I know. Even in their public discussions, they have not been raising the issue of public sector workers, right? So I think they also understand that instead of firing people and crippling the system, what you need to actually do is slowly build the system. And as long as it doesn't affect the, their targets, what they expect from the government, I think it won't be a problem. And especially after the post-disaster situation, I think they also understand there's a lot of rebuilding in terms of infrastructure and everything to do. So I think they are going to be lenient. That's my approach.
True. I mean, see, there are sectors that you really need to recruit people. For instance, teachers, education, health, doctors. Sometimes the revenue collecting officers from
especially
IRD,
engineers. I think
engineers, technical staff. These are the people. Technocrats you need more and more, right? Whereas if you take CEB, you have now it has come to 22,000. At one point it was 26,000. Whereas the subject minister told only 5,000 was enough to manage the institution.
I think that subject minister was not being truthful about that.
No, this is what he told, right? So, I mean, that shows how the political leaders have recruited their own people into these institutions, right? Now, how are you going to, send these people or give these people some skills and repurpose them for some other jobs? How are you going to do that?
With CEB, the approach that we have taken is we have opened a VRS, right? And we have kept it at a level that we would not lose trained, like you said, we don't want to lose engineers in the process, but there is a certain workforce that we don't mind letting go. So there's an VRS, open VRS, there was an open VRS, right? So anybody who wanted to opt out could have opted out. But CEB also needs a workforce, and I don't think it can be done with 5,000 people, as the previous minister said. So there is an assessment on what kind of a labor force is needed, and how are we going to retain that. One of the challenges that when the CEB restructuring happened, it is still undergoing actually, but one of the challenges was how do we retain the trained labor force within the CEB, because you can't find electronic and electrical engineers anywhere, right? It's a very high in demand job, and you see most of them migrating also. So you have to be, you don't want to, this is not because of the power of the engineers union, but genuinely it's a labor force that we need to keep in the country. So that is also why we didn't, the VRS scheme was kept at a level that would not encourage their leaving of the company. So that labor force is being restructured and recruited, repurposed within the CEB. And if anybody wants to leave, there is an option for that also. Because Shihar, what happens is if you forcefully fire people, there's also going to be political backlash. There's also going to be there's also going to be litigation over that, right? And nothing is going to be done. So you have to be very, I think, being engaging and democratic about situations is actually there is more dividend in that in the long term. That is what we see, right? Okay. So we are trying to be very, the transitions have to be very smooth instead of tough, and, because otherwise in certain institutions you see cases going on till now, you can't change anything. And you can't, do administrative changes in them, because of course you can go to the Court of Appeal or any kind of You can go and you can file a case and it'll just drag on. So why we don't want to get ourselves in that situation. So we are trying to be as engaging as as discuss. We discuss with everybody, trade unions, anybody. We discuss with them. We also don't see them as bad faith actors all the time. They also have their own concerns. So,
but Lakmali, the past experience we have is when you drag things, when you go through discussion and drag things, they will wait until they topple the government.
No, but I
and
think
go.
with CB it has worked. I genuinely think it has worked because there was a lot of resistance initially, but with a lot of discussions and with a lot of incentives also given to the the workers, the VRS and so on. I think.
But there is an issue going on, right? The people who have requested the VRS now they are not getting the VRS. They're still there.
I mean, there's
an issue.
They will get it. I think there might be an administrative issue, but the restructuring is happening. That is actually one of the restructurings that we have done relatively successfully, right? More successfully. So I think it's happening. And but then there are other areas which we will feel more resistance in terms of policy also. And but I mean, if you look at the discussion that had been happening around, let's say, for the LGBTQ community, I don't know how they are feeling right now. So I mean, it's some of the reforms are going to be tough. Some of the reforms are going to be they have to be strategic, I would say, right? The government, because eventually the responsibility of reform is on the government. Once a reform cannot go through, once a reform is stuck somewhere, you cannot blame anybody else. I know the opposition does it right now. They would say, we couldn't do it back then because the trade unions were opposing it. We don't want to say that. I think a good government has to be able to get everybody on board and go ahead with the reform and be flexible enough to, take it forward. So it is on us. We take that responsibility. And for that, we have to be strategic. The timing has to be right. The political environment has to be right, and we need to develop. There's also a part that media and civil society can actually play in certain reforms, in informing the public, educating the public, keeping these discussions on the surface level without letting it getting bogged down with other petty, political issues. You have to, have a good media environment, political environment also for reform. So we are very hopeful. I mean, with the first year that we had, we are very hopeful that the next few years are going to be less difficult for us, right? Because the first year was we are a new set of people in government, right? So we had to see how this is going, how are people reacting, how is the public reacting, how are the officials reacting, people we don't know, how are they reacting, how are the international community. I think everything has been very positive for us. The only problem that we've had is with certain sections of the opposition, but that is natural, right? So especially with, let's say, education reforms,
we'll speak about it. We'll speak about it separately. But since you spoke about this LGBTQ community, I remember it was President Andhra Kumar Dissanayake in his mandate said that it'll be fair by LGBT community and decriminalize it. What's happening on that?
So that's the thing. It is in the mandate that we are going to decriminalize LGBTQ activity. That is in, So what has happened is, I think it's really unfortunate that we have, started this discussion of LGBTQ promotion in a country where people of this community are actually affected at a very different level. It's not about promotion. It's about having basic human rights, right? So to be treated as a criminal within a country, I think everybody agrees that should not be the case. There's cross-party consensus on decriminalization.
But our constitution does not allow it, right? The constitution says...
no, but when the bill was challenged, when Premanath Dolawat, when he brought that bill to the parliament, the private members bill, it was actually challenged in the Supreme Court, and there was no challenge by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court did not, there was no any obstruction by the Supreme Court to take the bill forward, right?
So will you be proceeding with kind of a same bill? Or
but the idea is decriminalization. Our policy is decriminalization. There's no promotion. I don't think this is an entirely Western discourse that we have imported into this country. I don't know, because yes, there is a discussion on LGBTQ promotion in USA, and why do we need to bring that into our country? That is entirely not what we want to do, right? We are focusing on giving people basic human rights, being treated as human beings at the workplace, at your education institution, right? You don't have to be treated like criminals. And there's a lot of harassment and that they face because of criminalization, especially with the police, especially within the legal, apparatus, right? So there has to be some solution for that. And there was at least cross-party consensus to that. Even SLPP, which traditionally opposed these kind of reforms, were on board, which we saw with Dolawata's, intervention, which I think was a good intervention, right? And now, of course, what we see is there's a lot of resistance. I think what we are now seeing is politicizing of the issue.
But that came in, now let's talk about education reform. The whole education reform backfired because of that single, the link, right?
Yeah.
And then the allegation was this government is promoting gay among the students, and then LGBTQ. The whole thing about this LGBTQ and the promotion of LGBTQ and trying to please the Western agenda that came into effect, right? And now even the monks, right, religious leaders, everybody is against that, right? What actually happened in the educational reforms?
Yeah, I think with education, just to finish off what I was saying earlier, sure, I think we are committed to a mandate, right? Decriminalization is in the agenda. We are not tracking, we are not backing away from, we are not taking a step back from that. But I do think...
So what does that decriminalization mean?
Decriminalization, in the current law, in the penal code, homosexual sexual activity is considered a crime. Right? So which means that a certain group of people are criminals for their nature. And we don't think that's how it should be, right? So removing that crime from the penal code is decriminalization. And once you remove that from the penal code, they become, they attain the civilian status, because at this point, they're actually, by de facto, they're criminals. Anybody can harass them. Anybody can, put them in jail. Anybody can intimidate them. And they cannot achieve other rights, equal rights in workplace, in the public space, because they don't have this equal status in terms of other citizens. And I think anybody, even the people who oppose, even if you look at the discussion in the education reforms, even the people who are actively building this discussion and opposing what they call LGBTQ promotion, they also agree that decriminalization is not a problem, right? And I think even our religious leaders would not want people to be treated inhumanly eventually, right? So I think that's where we stand there. About what happened with education reforms, I think it is very unfortunate.
Before that, now decriminalization does that mean that Sri Lanka will see marriage of gay?
No.
Decriminalization
is not about civil rights. Okay. It's not about marriage rights. Okay. It's about, because there is a discrimination against.
So basically, you are trying to eliminate that discrimination.
Okay. Right? And I think even the LGBT community in Sri Lanka, their primary campaign has been decriminalization. I don't think anybody is asking for marriage rights or, the right to have children or what. This is a discussion that's in USA, right?
Yeah, that's right.
This is not relevant to Sri Lanka. And about the education reforms, I think what happened was there was that link of some gay dating site or some site, and
chatting site.
Yeah. And then that was unfortunately linked to the 6th grade 1 module. And I think that we admit as a government that should not have happened. That's not what we want. That is not government policy. It should not have happened. And that's a mistake or a deliberate sabotage, which we are trying to, investigate. We are investigating it right now. The CID is investigating. The education ministries, they have done preliminary investigations, and they have suspended officials involved in it also. So that should not have happened. That definitely shouldn't have. And as a government, we take responsibility for that. But I think even with that, there could have, so we are now, since that happened, we also want to see whether there are other because we do consider this to be a grave mistake, right? So if that kind of mistake can happen, we also want to see whether there are other challenges in the 6th grade module that need to be rectified, because this is about children. We don't want to for government, it would have been really easy to build. We have 2/3 in the parliament, right? And we have a lot of public support also for these education reforms. And it would have been really easy to say, okay, this is just a small mistake. We are going ahead with the reforms. But then we talk to the teachers unions, the lecturers unions, relevant stakeholders, and you have to show sensitivity to the doubts and the risks that they are also flagging about this. So what we thought was, okay, we'll stop this for this year and see whether there are any other issues that we need to rectify, and then start it next year. Because what will happen otherwise, once there is any mistake that pops up, it's going to be weaponized against the whole education reform process by the opposition, right? And when it happens, we can say, okay, the opposition did it, so but we also have to be responsible in stopping that, right? We have to make sure that there has to be some preemptive plan to stop it, which is what we are doing right now, because we also see what level of petty politics that can be played with this. So this LGBTQ promotion is entirely a discourse that was manufactured. This is a mistake. It has to be rectified. There has to be accountability over that also. We agree. But that is not state policy. There is no policy of LGBTQ promotion by the Sri Lankan state, right? Definitely not to 11-year-old children, right? So that's pretty much understood. But we also don't think that certain communities and, especially the identities need to be attacked at this level. I think that was very unfortunate and very insensitive also because you don't think about what will happen. There are actual LGBTQ people living in this country, right? How would they feel that their identity is completely attacked and made it look like some, grave mistake?
Moon Lanka, since 1995.
Lakmali, but more than I think it's about this LGBTQ, the real concern what I hear from the opposition and some of the senior officials is the consultation process and the discussion. So they have not seen in-depth consultation process and the discussion about these reforms for a long time, and they feel that this was suddenly came from somewhere and parachuted and then basically put it into the policy papers. Is it true?
Yeah.
One. Second thing, how would you rectify this in that next 1 year?
Okay, so it's not true, first of all, right? This is a process that has been going on since 2019 under different governments. There were, the NIE was the primary actor in it on education reforms. Education reforms have several segments, right? And curriculum development is only one part of it. There are other segments of it also in terms of infrastructure, public awareness, and all. There are 5 pillars to education reforms. So, and this is only one part of it. And NIE was responsible for it, right? And it has been happening for a long time. And I think this was in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, under Ranil Wickremesinghe's government. There was an attempt to sort of change the previous process and introduce new elements into it. And that was resisted at that time. And that was discussed in the Sectoral Oversight Committee also of the Parliament on education. And there were suggestions added by the Sectoral Oversight Committee. This has been in discussion for a very, very long time. What we did when we came into power was, there were certain aspects of that reforms that we did not want to go ahead with. For example, there was, we wanted to make sure that students had equal access to vocational training and academic training, right? So just because somebody comes from a poor background, that doesn't mean they should necessarily go ahead with the vocational training. And vocational training also doesn't have to be something that failed students do. So we changed certain things in the education reform to make sure that everybody, whether you're vocationally trained or you're academically trained, you are treated equally within the system. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one thing over the other, right? So the previous system encouraged failed students into vocational training. What we did was we introduced new modules and new learning activities to make sure that students can actually understand where they are inclined, where they are good at, and then gradually move towards that without feeling that is something that you did wrong or you failed at something, so you have to do something else. So these are an equal access. As a government, we are committed to free education. We are committed to equal access to education, right? So the previous reform was heavily inclined towards removing that equal access and the free education nature of our education system. So we recommitted government expenditure, government funding into this because any reform requires financing. So primarily the issue is about who's going to finance the material, who's going to finance these trainings. Teachers need to be trained, right? There has to be new equipment, new infrastructure. Schools have to be redeveloped. Who's going to do this? One thing you can do is put it on the school development society and say parents have to do it. And the other part is, the other line would be to say, no, the government is going to finance this. So we are taking a there's a government commitment to finance the education reforms, which was clearly expressed by the Deputy Education Minister also in the Parliament. He clearly said if schools are asking to buy smart screens or anything, that's not right. It's supposed to be financed through the government, right? So there were certain aspects of it that we didn't want to go ahead with. And there were certain sudden changes. For example, so there's a lot of talk about the ADB loan and all of that. So under that, there was a proposal to, introduce changes to the 10th grade immediately, which we did not think was how we should be doing it, which is why we are doing it incrementally, first year, sixth year, which it gives the student to, and the parents also to adapt to the system. If you do it in 10th grade, when the next year is an examination year, that's tough, right? That can actually, create difficulties for students also. So there were certain elements of it that we did not like, that we think were, that would have disrupted education of our students and the education system in general, that we changed. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I don't think anybody in the parliament or anybody in the education sector would disagree with that.
But was this discussed with the opposition? And
it was discussed. I mean, there was discussions within the parliament. And then I think there's a clear paper that is presented by the education minister, available to the public on their website. It has been available for some time now. So, and the opposition, they raised a lot of questions back in July, I feel, in July, August time, around religious education and history education, again, on misinformation. There was a huge misinformation campaign saying that we are not teaching history in schools, right? Which was not the case. Then we corrected it. Because what happens is, until a government presents a policy, the government has to present the policy and discuss, right? So the opposition also has to, sort of wait until that happens. What they did was they picked up information from here and there and started canvassing it in the media and in the parliament, and then, sort of created a distorted discussion about education reforms. And we regret the fact that it happened. And I think as the ministry and as the government, we also have to be very careful about how we build up the media narrative on reforms, which is a learning outcome for us.
How concerned, Lakmali, is the government about your popularity after this, especially after this reform? I mean, everybody is seen kind of thinking that you want to implement this LGBTQ policies, and there is a narrative that you don't respect the Buddhism and the Buddhist monks, right? There is a narrative now, right? And they even the monks, the influential Buddhist monks also raise the same concern that this government does not consider Buddhism as important religion. I mean, that's constitutionally the Buddhism is given the high priority. What do you have to say about that?
I think, Shihar, I think some of these concerns that you're raising they are not popular concerns, right? I don't think, if you look at the education reforms, there's a huge demand from parents to actually go ahead with the 6th grade reform also. I think that is the more popular demand, because actually people understand, like students, parents, they understand the difficulty of getting education at this point, right? the problems in the education system, problems in the school, the mismatch that you have with education and jobs in the country. So I think everybody understands that. I don't think parents are concerned about an LGBTQ. They genuinely think it's a mistake. This is what they're saying right now, right? Okay, there was a mistake, remove the link and go ahead with the reform. That is the actual demand coming from people. What is very unfortunate is that there is a certain high intent, highly loud and, very organized campaign especially on social media on this LGBTQ promotion issue. And I think it's very unfortunate that the mainstream opposition of the country picked it up as their opposition against the reforms, right? That's how this was built. Even the Buddhist monks, the high priests of the Buddhist, the Malbatu and Asagiri temples and other, the leaders of the Buddhist community. I think they are very supportive of the reforms now. If you look at the statements that they're making right now, they have been discussing with opposition politicians and government politicians also. And they are I think everybody now understands that this was just some fluke that we all, ran after, and we shouldn't have done that. And I think it was organized. I don't think it was an organic opposition. It was an organized opposition. And I think the Buddhist monks, Catholic priests, any religious clergy would not be against modernized education, right? So I think they understand it now. And I think they are more advocate for reforms than us, because there is a lot of public pressure also from parents, especially coming to support the reforms. We are not concerned about actually, we are very, we are happily surprised by because in Sri Lanka, you have a history of these cultural differences being weaponized against communities. You've had people setting up, Tamil people against Sinhalese, Muslims against Sinhalese. Now there is a trend of going into other differences, whether you're a woman or a man, whether you're LGBTQ or not. So these are the kind of differences that is being weaponized right now. So we are very happy that kind of discourse is not actually tracking with the public, right? That they're actually more concerned with real issues, like, what happens to our children when they come out of the school and they can't find a job, right? What happens to their mental health when they are in the school, right? Are they giving an update? Are they given an updated education? And those are the real issues, right? So these are the issues, we are very happy to discuss even with the opposition. I think the Prime Minister has also said that if you actually build up, if you actually give us some, this is why when we listen to the teachers' unions and other trade unions in the education sector, there were some legitimate concerns, and it is not fair to, go ahead when there are legitimate concerns. So let's take time and, perfect this and bring this out, because eventually this is for all of us, for our children, right? And as adults, we have to be responsible towards children. We can't they are not lab rats. They can't be given certain things and, they are not, they also have rights. They also have a right to good education. So we have to be responsible for that. I think it's really unfortunate. I don't want to blame the opposition because it's the nature of the opposition, but I think it's really unfortunate that kind of discussion was, and if you really look at it, I also think there are members of the opposition who regret that also. For example, ITAC, the Tamil politicians especially, and yesterday I think Hizbullah also, MP Hizbullah also mentioned that, they are not against reforms. There are, good politicians who actually want to support the government on good things that they do. Harsha De Silva mentioned that, we should go ahead with the reforms. So I think that's a good thing. There are people within the opposition also who understand the importance of this. It's just a little group of people who are who are agitating very loudly in an organized manner. And I honestly feel the opposition leader should not give in to that. He is the opposition leader. He should also have the responsibility of handling the opposition and making sure that we get quality criticism against the government, not this, this below the belt criticisms against, communities and women. That is not expected actually. There are certain political parties that we expect this from. to be very honest, I would not expect anything different from Vimal Veeramansa. I think he should be, that is exactly the brand of politics that he was doing, right? But, to certain, seasoned politicians within the parliament doing that, that was not expected, right? And I think they are coming back on track, which is good. Even though there is opposition, I think it is good because we also want to have a serious discussion about education reforms. We also want them to be part of it. And I think that'll be it's good that discussion changed. And there is, more focus on the, more serious concern about whether NIE should be reformed. Are there officials who are capable of doing it? Do we have enough teachers? Do we have enough resources? These are the real questions. And these are the questions that should have been asked. So I think once those are settled and once we are able to convince all the stakeholders of that, next year is going to be a better year for education reforms. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some of the criticism, especially in the social media, where they post some of the pre-election voice cut and the post-election voice cuts, right? One is scrapping the IMF deal, or at least changing the debt sustainability assessment analysis, right? And then using scientific data for to predict disasters, right? Which we actually failed, right? And then reducing electricity tariff. Reducing or removing 18% VAT on essentials, reducing borrowing, right? Now the debt cycle is still continuing. For instance, 2016, the total debt, the borrowing limit has been marked at 3.8 trillion rupees, right? So people see, what you said and what you're doing is totally two different things. And these are weaponized against the government. Can you give us a reality check on this?
Yeah, I think scrapping the IMF deal, we were never going to scrap the IMF deal. We were very clear about that. We want to talk to IMF and change some of the terms in the deal. Debt sustainability analysis, I think there was a point where it could have been changed, but after you reach agreements with the creditors, you can't change the DSA, right? So that was the practical reality of it, and we went ahead with it. In terms of changing what was in the IMF, we did change a lot of things. I think people don't see it because it never got implemented, right? So for example, there was a imputed rental income tax proposal, which was expected to go ahead in 2025. We removed it. And even in 2026, it's not going ahead, right? And then in pay taxes were reduced. And we removed VAT on dairy products because of nutrition concerns for children, right? And then we were able to, the digital services tax was supposed to be one of the taxes at 30%. And we were able to reduce it to 15% and suspend it until July this year. So there were so many changes that did take place in terms of, we didn't impose a single new tax within last year, right? The vehicle import taxes were actually imposed in the previous regime. We didn't remove the tax, but it was imposed in the previous regime, right? And so there were changes within the IMF also that we discussed. And so, for example, after DITTO happened, in the post-disaster situation, we were able to increase the expenditure limits also. So there are changes that we have been discussing with the IMF and implementing. It's because they are not implemented. Because most of the things that we do with the IMF is getting rid of conditions, right? So because they're not implemented, people don't understand that these are things that's not happening. I think that is what's happening here. And I think IMF also, this is something that we have been, the position that we had with IMF is that when you discuss on an authentic ground, when you discuss on the side of the people, there are things that you can actually convince, external stakeholders and do better. We believe that Ranil Wickremesinghe's government did not genuinely engage IMF, right? So because of that, you had we still think it was a bad IMF program for Sri Lanka, right? But I think even IMF understands that the situation has changed. We have a government that's more democratically represented, and they have a huge mandate also. So they are very flexible with us. They are very lenient with us, and they are willing to discuss. So we are not against international institutions. We don't want to remove them out of our existence. What we want is, more respect towards our public and a fairer deal. And I think we are trying to do that even with the IMF was in Sri Lanka, right? So is in Sri Lanka. So they are discussing what can be changed to face, because you need a lot of government financing to rebuild the country. And IMF has restricted the financing space. So these are things that we need to discuss and somehow get, we are hopeful that there will be certain changes, right? So that is this is the practical reality. And we knew that when we came into government, we knew that we were in an IMF program. We'll have to continue with it for a certain period. And once we show that there are certain other, for example, revenue collection, we have surpassed the targets, right? And we have surpassed the targets not just because there was huge income tax coming on, not income tax, the tariff, the duty coming on imports. It was also because compliance has improved in all the agencies. Compliance has actually improved. So we can show that, yes, you don't have to increase the taxes in certain situations. You can actually increase compliance and collect more taxes. So that we have to show that, because we have a bad record of compliance, right? So we can't just work on hypothesis. We have to show that this can be done. And we also have to show the gaps in analysis that IMF has been doing. I think our government has been very good at doing that, which is also why the IMF has also been very flexible with us. And so that has to be, I think this is an area that we have actually managed well, in spite of criticism. And the disaster, of course, this is disaster prevention has to be strengthened. It is an area that was ignored for a very long time. And when we came into government in August 6th, the president actually called the Disaster Management Council, which has not been in operation for a long time. And now we understand that there are certain gaps in the mechanism also. And there are certain things that, for example, Shihar, this Disaster Management Council is supposed to have a plan rolled out for every government institution to tackle disaster, which was not available for us, right, when we met with the disaster. And that has to be corrected. And so that's why we are trying to, amend the disaster management law also to empower and to make sure that there is a good mechanism. And I think that is something that we need to fix in the system. It is unfortunate that did to happen in between that, right? And we were not technologically equipped, and administratively also sometimes not equipped to face it. But I think that should not happen, that would not repeat. And that is also why we took extra burden on the government to fix what was, in people's lives. There was a lot of, people completely lost faith in when you lose your, loved ones, when you lose your jobs, when you lose your house, it's tough going ahead. And we understand that. That's why the post-disaster relief package was 500 billion altogether, and, for the next year. So we do hope that everything, a lot has to change for Sri Lanka to be climate resilient. Because this is not just about one cyclone entering the country. It's also about the changing climate in the region, and generally about improving climate resilient infrastructure. We need climate resilient financing schemes. So this is an entirely new area that we have never, yes, our presidents previously have talked about it everywhere, right? And they have, I think Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe spoke about it at every international forum, but they haven't really done anything about it. Doing something actually means you allocate money for it, and you build new policies into it, and you get new people to, do things on the ground. These have to be implemented. So there's no point in talking about climate change and climate resilience at every international forum if you have not summoned the Disaster Management Council at least, right? So that is, we don't want to go in that way. It's not about talking things. It's about, because we're a government. When you're in the opposition, the only thing you can do is critique, no? That is the only thing you can do. You can be responsible opposition and critique. But when you're in the government, it's not about critiquing yourself, or it's not about, talking a lot. once you have power, you have to use that power to actually fix these problems. And that might take more time, and that might, actually give you less time to, go ahead and talk about things. But I think this is more important. And I think the priorities are right. So that is something that we need to fix. I do agree, right? And I'll just take electricity tariff, of course. If you really look at the electricity tariff and the electricity tariff changes within the last year, there's only one time it actually increased, right? And the tariffs are considerably less than what it was when we came into power. I think it's about 20% lesser than what it was. And changes in the tariff, of course, it's still very high. That's true. But that has to be fixed through productivity within the sector. It can't be fixed through just price manipulation, which was what was happening. So we don't want to go there. There is a plan to, bring in more investments into energy sector, bring down the prices of the cost of production has to go down, and certain areas have to be modernized and reformed to bring down the cost of production. And we are on it. I mean, this is why the electricity bill was prioritized. This is why there is a new Energy Transition Act also we are developing, and we are prioritizing that sector because for the economic program that we want to implement also, energy is very important, right? Because Sri Lanka is not industrialized. To bring actual investments, you need good energy policies, which we don't have. So that's one thing. And essential prices, we managed to bring down the dairy products VAT. Stationaries, of course, we couldn't. We did discuss this, but there was no fiscal space to do it. What we went ahead and we allocated the subsidies for students. We gave 6,000 rupees for every Aswasama family to buy the stationery as a more targeted form of relief. But we are very hopeful that this is something we are still negotiating, right? We are not a government that sits back and, okay, done. That's not how we work with stuff. We will still negotiate with the IMF. And we are hopeful that there will be, an out from the stationery VAT also. We'll see. I mean, this is something that the finance ministry is working on. And the borrowing limit was 4 trillion last year. We didn't actually borrow at that. I mean, we didn't borrow 4 trillion, right? And there is legal provisioning to borrow more if there is a requirement, but we didn't have to. We actually borrowed less than what was required or what was predicted. And this year, of course, there is a problem because we need more money for the rebuilding work. But we are still keeping it, we are still hopeful that the borrowing won't exceed what was expected. So even under tight situations, we are coming after disaster, right? Which has caused about 4 billion USD loss to the country, right? And our infrastructure in the central country is completely dismantled. The railways, the roads, the schools, the hospitals, they are like severely affected. So we need money. And the debt cycle, of course, Shiraz, it was not necessarily about local borrowing, I think. The debt cycle more had to do with borrowing riskily in the international market and then using it not unproductively within the country. What happened was we had huge external debt stock and we couldn't finance it eventually, right? That was the problem of the debt crisis. So even with that, even the domestic borrowing, we're keeping it at a limit. Our target was to actually bring down the domestic financing cost for the next year. We managed to bring it down this year, and the target was to bring it down next year. There might be a challenge because now we need more money for rebuilding work, but we are still hopeful that the domestic financing cost will have to, stay at a limit. That is how you break the debt cycle, right? Because we actually borrow to pay debt. We are debt servicing by borrowing, right? So once you reduce the requirement to borrow, you actually don't have to debt service also a lot. So we are keeping the interest rates low. We are trying to, maintain the interest rates, keep the borrowing requirements at a level that is sustainable. And I think it has worked up until this point. There are huge shocks within the global the international political scenario is also not very healthy. There are certain changes happening which can impact Sri Lanka. And we understand that, there are things that are beyond our control. For example, nature is beyond our control. What the US administration do with their foreign policy is beyond our control. What happens in the Middle East is beyond our control. But there are certain things that we can, use within our control also. Actually, Shiraz, this was the criticism that we had about Gotabe's Rajapaksa's government also. Yes, the COVID happened, pandemic happened. Yes, there was a war in in Ukraine. We understand that nobody's asking us to stop that, right? But we do have policies and instruments within the country that could have managed it. And I think we've had challenges of similar scale within the last year also. We've had the Middle Eastern war. We've had the tariff changes, the US tariff policy. We've had the natural disasters coming to the country at a scale that was not expected. But we have managed to, keep stability. I think that is an achievement. And just because these are not, you don't have a lot of media campaigning over, these are not events like you would, right? These are not events, but these are the changes that you require to actually take forward the country in a stable manner. Another
key criticisms against the government is Lakmali indecisiveness. They're not taking the decisions on time, and this was also stated during Ditwa, right? That the government did not bring in the emergency on time, right? They brought it on the 27th, whereas they should have brought it on 25th, right? This indecisiveness seems to be actually dragging some of the decision. I mean, I hear this also from diplomats. When something happens, the government does not come up with a statement immediately. That gives space for others to come up with various interpretation and misinformation, right? And then government, rather than giving their stance, they have to come up with correction and verifying things. This has been happening. Why is it happening?
I think it's about emergency that you raised. I think emergency was imposed pretty fast, right? It was just one day. And I don't think there was a delay in it. And the emergency regulations were also issued really fast as well. So I don't think there was any delay in imposing that, if that was the example that we are referring to. But to respond to, I think what more than indecisiveness, I think what the government might be lacking is a good communication strategy. And a good communication strategy to, especially communicate to maybe certain people who are at a distance from the government, to understand what we're doing, to understand why we are doing certain things. I think there has to be a communication strategy that is developed and we are working on it actually. I mean, right now we are working on the fact that because not everybody should be, our ministers, the cabinet of ministers, our officials, they are more focused on actually doing things. Right? This is, I think, and they are not focused on, showing what they're doing or, telling people what they're doing. But that is something that we need to fix. It's not enough to do it. It's also there also has to be a way of communicating it to the public so that they build confidence in what is happening with the government. That is something that we are trying to fix at the moment within the government.
Otherwise,
also.
you'll have to always respond to
negative criticism. Yeah, that is true.
Lakmal, now when you were in the opposition, some of the promises you all made is you will scrap or change the OSA, Online Safety Act, and then you will scrap PTA, and now we see the draft of PSTA, protecting state from the terrorism activities, which is being raised, right? The concerns have been raised on some of the clauses of PSTA where they say it's more dangerous than PTA. I mean, what's happening on this? I mean, are you all having discussions? How are you going to proceed with them?
Any of these, so if, for example, Protection of State from Terrorism Act is a draft act. This is something developed by a committee looking at the previous act, previous bill actually, the previous draft, and it's considerably, I don't know on what basis are they saying that this is worse than the previous one, because it has considerably increased the democratic rights within the regime, right? But of course, it's just a draft. If there are changes that is required, what you need to do is engage with the draft I think the ministry is taking in public. We did a round of public consultations before the draft, or before the committee started work. And then once the committee has concluded the work, now there's another opportunity for public consultations until February 28th, I think, right? I think instead of saying, I actually, because I am a person who's interested about and I mean, this is something that I have been working on because I was in the committee also, right? So I have actually read almost every criticism that has been in the online arena and in newspapers and so on. To be very honest, I don't find specifics. There has to be specifics on, this is bad, this has to change, right? And certain things that they're trying to say are, it might look possible. I agree, because we have a very bad track record of practicing counter-terrorist legislations. So there might be concerns and risks. So how do we mitigate them? That has to be, explained within the legal regime also. So for example, the previous act had a tendency to include democratic activity within terrorist activity, right? Which was not PTA actually, the draft that was supposed to replace PTA, which was called, I think, CTA and ATA at one point. So those that had a tendency to include democratic activity like civilian protests, strike actions within terrorism definition. This draft actually excludes all of that explicitly within the act and says, trade union action and democratic protests are not considered to be not necessarily terrorist activity, right? So there is an actual defense for people within the bill and within the draft. But if you feel like it's too expensive, if you feel like there are other areas that are still included within the definition, I think the best thing to do is to engage with that and to show actually how this happens. And our government is actually ready to, because we don't need to, we are not interested in bringing an oppressive counter-terror law. That is not the intention. If you look at the changes that has been done in the act, you can clearly see the intention of the government, right? So, and we're still willing to listen and understand where the issues are coming from. And especially from the public, especially from the civil society, especially from communities who have been affected by this act. I think there is a period to engage and change the current draft also. So instead of considering it to be something that need to be capped, I think it's premature. All of
What
this.
about the OSA?
OSA, of course, is being discussed. No, OSA is.
So you are going to revise it, right? We
are going to revise I understand the idea was to revise it. I think the media ministry is working on revising the OSA. Again, these acts, because it concerns a larger public and because it concerns democratic rights of the public, we are going to be very, very consultative about these reforms. And I think our PTA reform has shown that we are very consultative. I just want to, I mean, if anybody is listening, I just want I want them to encourage to take the chance and, engage with the policymakers and the government to actually, because we want that to happen. We are not, we engage with the previous criticism on ATA, for example, and try to change the act. But if there are other further criticism, please come and, talk to people who are, write to the government. For one thing, there is a period of written submissions, and then there is still a period of engagement. I think the ministry is willing to talk. This is just the committee draft. This is not even gazetted. So this is not gazetted. So the gazette hasn't even come out, and there is a period to engage. And instead of being there's a criticism of education reform so that you didn't know what to do. And so, I mean, this is a good example of actually knowing what to do. So please engage.
Let's talk about investment climate, Lakmali. Now, everybody expected, investments, foreign investment to flow in, soon after you all come in, because you have eliminated the corruption at top level, right? But still, we have not seen that much of significant investment, right?
Yeah.
Rise in the investment. I think it's almost similar or little higher than what it was in the previous year. What are the steps you are being in the process taking to increase the investments, and so, where do you find the issues?
FDI is actually you identified, this is actually the area that is essential. This is critical for our development. And this is an area that we have to change, right? So one thing is we have to find areas where investments are needed. And this is why the budget speech of the president highlighted areas that we are looking at investments. For example, energy, data centers. These are the kind of modern investments that we are trying to bring into the country, because what has happened over the 40 years that we've had with the BOI and with with the free market policies, that you have small investments coming in a very ad hoc manner. You don't have a policy for investment, right? You don't actually highlight this is where the government is looking for investment. This is where the investment gap is. These are the infrastructure that we are willing to provide. These are the tax concessions we are willing to provide. So I think our budget is a good example of setting out that policy. And even with the port city, we have revised the port city bill also, amended the bill. And I think the port city is also attracting a considerable amount of investments. It did last year also, and we're expecting it to grow. Right. And but those are, of course, more towards real estate, financial services type of investments. But we also need more industrial investments. That is where the energy sector investments are crucial for the country. And we are trying to, get into that. And even when our ministers, travel around the world, when they go into these official tours, this is a sector that we have constantly flagged and talked about. So we are working on it. The Energy Ministry and the Finance Ministry, especially under the leadership of the President, is working on it, right? And I think there are also certain law reforms that has to happen. For example, the single window is not fully implemented yet. And there are, administrative inefficiencies that we need to improve. So we are also looking at that. There's the tariff policy that we need to, the national tariff policy has to be revised and legislated on, presented. And, there's a public-private partnership law that we are, working on. So I think once the legal environment is prepared, the anti-corruption is, of course, it has helped to build confidence in the government. It has helped to build the confidence that, we are not looking at commissions or anything, that we are genuinely looking at the investment quality, the amount of the investment, and what it brings to the country. So I think that has, if you look at the amount of Japanese investors, the state, the JICA projects that has started, the KOICA has started certain projects in the country, and Chinese investments have, restarted. India has restarted work. So there is a lot of confidence there's a lot of, boost in the confidence that is being given by that level of state intervention. But we are still looking at private investors, and this is an area that we really need to improve. And I think that is an area that you also need to completely, continue to flag every time. So, yeah.
There is an increasing agitation among the judiciary officials that the government is intervening in a way that they are promoting some of the their own allies within the judiciary community. Anything happening? I mean,
no, I don't know where that's, because the Judicial Services Commission is the one responsible for the judiciary. Government cannot do anything.
I think this was raised by Jayasri Jayasekar also in the parliament.
I think what has happened is the judiciary has taken an active role in fighting corruption within the judiciary and fighting delays within the judiciary necessarily, right? So I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. And there have been certain promotions, there have been certain transfers, which might look,
What we hear is some of the seniors are overlooked and the juniors are being promoted ahead of them.
Anyway, that is not something that is driven by the government policy.
I know, but
that is not something that is within the government control also. That is something that is done by the Judicial Services Commission, and largely headed by the Supreme Court. So I think this is not something that needs to be criticizing. That, of course, entails, there was a huge discussion about this within the parliament also. There was a motion, there was a request to have a select committee on this. And I think the speaker also rightfully said, this is not an area the parliament has to, go into, because this is, that actually interferes in the independence of the judiciary. I think there are certain gaps, because I was a lawyer also. I am a lawyer. I understand if you talk to people who access justice system, there are concerns, right? Those have to be fixed. And these are not just about, certain dramatic or not dramatic, radical reforms, drastic reforms are required within the justice sector also. But I think it is best to leave it to that sector with technical support from, experts to do that without politicizing it and the government getting involved in removing judges and so on. We have a history of that. But we are not going to go there. We think it's something that the judiciary has, because we respect the independence of the judiciary. And there are certain things in the constitution that we think should change, but the independence of order to judiciary is not something that should change. And as the president, even the president has, if you look at the promotions of the Supreme Court judges, if you look at the new judges who are being recruited in the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, it takes a seniority basis, right? We are not favoring anybody over others. So I think it would remain like that.
But about the AG, there was a protest also the other day
On
AG, right?
Yeah.
What's still happening there?
I think what is happening is there is certain agitation within the civil society about the AG's department. And this is not just coming from, there's a certain section of social media actors who are doing it. But I read, I'm not sure where I read it. I think it was on social media where, Professor Savitri Gunasekara has also come forward, and Professor Savitri Gunasekara is esteemed, personality in the legal community. And even she has come forward and said that there are certain reforms that has to be done within the AG's department. Not necessarily about the AG, I think. This is not about a personal vendetta against the AG. I think the department might have certain, gaps. There's no harm in admitting it, right? But, you don't have enough human resources. You don't have enough, physical resources also sometimes to do the job. So these are the gaps that has to be filled through government policy. And there is agitation about the work that is being done by the AG's department, by the public. I do not want to say that they don't have the right to raise that concern. I don't think there's independence of the AG cannot be challenged by public scrutiny. Independence of the AG will be challenged if there's too much government involvement or if there's political involvement, instructing the AG to act in a certain way, and that is not being done. I don't think that is being done, right? The AG is largely acting in an independent manner, which was confirmed by the Justice Minister also. We are not, forcing the AG to do anything. We are not forcing AG not to do anything. It's completely up to the AG's department to adhere to government policy, of course. It's a government institution, public institution. So adhere to government policy, but keep on doing the work that they have been doing. But it still doesn't say that public scrutiny should not happen over the AG's department. These are all institutions, including the president, including the prime minister, including the Supreme Court and the AG's department. All of us are funded by the public. We are here for the public. Sovereignty comes from the people, right? We have to respect that. We have to respect people's right to criticize us as much as the government is criticized. We are not going to come and say, the people don't have the right to criticize. People have the right to criticize. Some might be unwarranted, some might be misunderstood, some might not understand the gravity of what they're saying, but still we cannot, ask them not to say it. That is the policy that we have taken. Social media, any criticism. That is the policy that we have taken. We have not banned criticism, right? So I think AG's department is also a public office, accountable to the public, and has to be, held accountable, and that's fine. AG has to,
There was a move by the government. I think President also appointed the committee for this to establish an independent public prosecutor's office. What's the update on that?
Independent prosecutor's office, of course, is something that was in our manifesto. Yeah. Again,
there was a committee appointed by the president to look into this.
By the cabinet, I think.
Yeah.
There was a committee appointed by the cabinet to look into the independent prosecutors reform process, and I think there were several discussions with the AG's department also on how to go forward. But I think there is some resistance within the AG's department because there was a press statement by the AG's department lawyers on the independent prosecutor's office. And to be very frank, Shihar, I don't think that's a policy concern. There's a mandate to do it, right? It cannot be decided on, the AG's department the Aegis department, I mean, you can come and say these are the risks of it. These are the areas that we want to improve. These are the areas that you might want to look at once you go ahead with this policy, and a suitable timeline for it can be fixed. But once you have a policy set and once you have public mandate, people's mandate, this is what I was trying to, when we started off, this is what I said. There is certain resistance within certain stakeholders. And of course, the Aegis department is a very important stakeholder, right? So we don't want to, we are not, of course, going to interfere with the independence of the Aegis department. There was a time when the government didn't get what was that scheme? Divinaguma? When the Divinaguma scheme was not passed by the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice was removed in this country, right? And there was a time...
She asked for, I think, a referendum.
Yeah. When the provincial councils, when that was challenged, right? And when there was a time, I think on J.R. Jayawardena's regime, the Supreme Court was, openly rebuked, and there was the judges' houses were attacked, right? Because the Supreme Court was not in agreement with the executive. We are not going to take that road. We are not. I mean, we have enormous power within the parliament, and I think as a government also we are very popular. But we are not going to, intimidation and, tackling the Supreme Court or the Aegis department is not how we are going to go forward with it. But I think healthy public discussion about these issues are not bad. And I really do feel the legal community has to take that, has to take the discussion in that direction also. Instead of being very defensive, we also have to be very open about the, gaps in the system. And within that discussion, there will be a space to improve. So I do believe that for independent prosecutor's office to be established, it's very important that the Aegis department actually cooperates and agrees to that policy. And civil actors in the legal community, BASL and other civil society actors, people who are interested in democratic reform, have to, kind of build a discussion over it. And I think there's a certain responsibility towards media also. To give space to this kind of discussion. So if there is any misunderstanding, the government can also talk about why it's required. People who have suffered through the system can talk about why it's required. And, we can actually build understanding on why it's required, or, to what extent it is required. And, if there are failures in other countries, how do we manage it here? So that kind of discussion is required without being too confrontational about it.
You said that there are some resistance, to government to implement the government mandate, and you also said that there could be some sabotage in the educational reform.
Yeah, we are not sure.
Yeah, we are not sure.
Be,
right?
yeah.
So this raises a concern whether there is a parallel deep state, working against the government in the public sector.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a history in this country. We have seen this in the past governments, where deep state is so strong that they can topple the government, in an election without an election.
Yeah.
How concerned are you about this? I mean, do you see?
I think without calling it the deep state, which makes it look like a bit of a conspiracy,
Yeah.
I think I would think of this as entrenched power, right? There are certain groups or certain stakeholders within the state. Like I said, there's the democratic, politically elected segment of it, which is the government that you see every day, the president, the MPs, and the Pradesh Sabha councillors, the opposition. This is the democratically elected element of it. But there's also a group of people who are not elected. There's unelected power, right? And the check on that unelected power is actually the elected power. So what do we do with that is I think there has to be a healthy discussion about how do we, go ahead with that. I don't think, to be very honest, Shihar, I don't think there is any conspiracy anywhere against the government. I don't think that is what is happening here. What is actually happening here is that because this government has a huge democratic mandate. Democratically, I don't think any government in the past has had this level of genuine democratic mandate, right? You've had governments with 2/3, but those are mostly, negotiated exchange of, favors. That is the level of, and if you look at J.R. Jayawardena's government in 1977, yes, they had 2/3 in the parliament, but if you look at the public representation, the actual numbers of votes, that was not reflected in the 2/3, right? So there was still a lot of resistance. The opposition was very strong even that time. We don't have it right now. We have a hugely popular government with a huge popular mandate. And I think there might be a certain level of intimidation within the entrenched sectors of the state who have always had power, right? Who get promoted, who don't feel public pressure. And now you are required to, feel the public pressure because the government is representative of the public, not necessarily against the public, right? So there might be a certain friction there, but I don't consider it to be a conspiracy. I think what we need to do is take it forward towards more democratization. Areas which are not sufficiently democratized have to be more democratized, right? So public scrutiny, establishing, institutions which will actually allow public scrutiny, regulate public scrutiny, right? Which is the problem we have right now because everything is on social media, everything is on a tag, so like a hashtag, and that is how public scrutiny happens because there's no regulated forum to do it right now. So I think one of the maybe when we talk about constitutional reform, this is an area that we need to talk about. How do we engage the public in a more regulated, constructive manner without making the officials who are not necessarily elected. We are used to this, like every day people call us and question us. Every day when you go to your, seat, people would ask, why is this not happening? What is happening? What you would ask us. But this is not the case for a public official. They are not used to public scrutiny. So they would feel very, intimidated by it. I don't think you have to feel that way. I think democracy is a good thing. Democracy is not a bad thing. And you never have to be scared of democracy. When democracy is promoted, it always ends up in good outcomes, right? Sri Lanka is a good example of that. But it has to be done in an organized, regulated manner without getting into chaos and disturbance and hooliganism, which is not what we want. We have seen countries being destroyed by that also, right? So we promote democracy, promote regulated, orderly exercise of democracy, peaceful exercise of democracy. And I think there's a change of culture that needs to happen within the state, which is a bit scared of democracy. And that, I think, is the gradual change that we need to, you can't force it also. You have to you have to be very understanding. Entrenched power is not a luxury. It's not a privilege. Power eventually, like I said, every kind of power enjoyed by people in power comes from the people. And once you get used to that, I think our system will start working much better. Yeah.
One last question,
Yeah.
Lakmali. The NPP's main partner is JVP,
Yeah.
right? Janata Vimukti Peramuna,
Yeah.
which has opposed Indian involvement in Sri Lanka from 1987 and from its inception.
Yeah.
And this anti-Indian sentiment was mainly driven by that party during that era, whereas now it is forced to kind of work with India.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate this foreign policy with India, China, US? How is the government?
I don't think there were
navigating?
any country's too much involvement in the country. We resist that to this date, right? There is no change in that. No country can send an army to Sri Lanka. No country can invade Sri Lanka. This is a sovereign democratic country and we stand by that. We definitely stand by any intervention against other countries also on the same basis, right? So, but we have to work with countries. India is not an enemy of Sri Lanka. India is a good friend of Sri Lanka, has historically been a good friend of Sri Lanka. So has been China. So has been other countries who have been very helpful towards us, right? So we have to find a balance. We are not pro-India, pro-China, pro-USA. We are pro-Sri Lanka. Anybody is pro-Sri Lanka can work with us, right? There's no bar to. I think countries are also like even India, China, any other countries also, getting used to our foreign policy. There was a time when you can, exchange certain favors. Our political leadership cannot be bought, cannot be pressurized. You have to actually show genuine interest in Sri Lankan people. And I think these countries have also done that. Like China and India have been very helpful to Sri Lanka over the past few years, especially during the economic crisis. And especially now, India has come forward, China has come forward, other countries have come forward, right? So I think as long as we are genuine, as long as we are democratic and as long as we are standing on a position that doesn't harm our national interest, I think we can engage with any country and get into agreements. But we know where to draw the line. We are not going to be pressurized into anything. That is, and definitely not going to be pressurized against national and public interest. And there was a history of that happening in the past. It's not just because these countries were, bad or whatever. It was there was a gap in our foreign policy. It's our own mistake, right? So we need to fix that when we have fixed that. And we are going forward being friendly with everybody. I think our Prime Minister has done a wonderful job winning over so many, international support within the Davos Summit. And so I think IMF, the World Bank, ADB, any country, any international challenge that we've had within the last year, we have successfully Shihar, I think everybody can agree that we have, very successfully maneuvered certain challenges with, very unpredictable world leaders also. If you can see, some of these leaders are very unpredictable. And the international political arena, I think, is changing rapidly. This is a challenge that we have, because there was a time when there were, rules and there were principles, conventions. The UN was very powerful. I think that era is ending. I think we are getting into an era of, even more anarchy within the international political terrain, right? And for a small country like Sri Lanka with a very weak economy, this can be very challenging. So we have to be careful. We need friends more than enemies, and we are hoping to make more friends.
Thank you very much, Lakmali, for your in-depth and insight answers on all the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shihar, for having me, and it's really lovely to meet you after a long time.
That was Lakmali Hemachandra, attorney at law, an MP with the government party, NPP. Thank you for watching us. Stay tuned for another episode. Thank you.
Moon Lanka, since 1995.